And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Tuesday, potentially snowy evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. An interesting film, which is, I think, a pretty good adaptation of a best-selling, very highly praised novel. Film got shitty reviews, which have never really made any sense to me, but we'll get to that. So the movie, celebrating its 25th anniversary today, it's crazy that this movie is 25 years old, is Danny Boyle's adaptation of Alex Garland's bestseller, The Beach. And it stars Leonardo DiCaprio. So the film is also notable. It was DiCaprio's first movie first lead role. This wasn't his first movie. He did the film with Woody Allen, Celebrity, where he was in for about 10 minutes. But this was his first lead role after I Need You to Swim, Rose. Swim. After playing Jack Dawson so famously and so well, where was his Oscar nomination? They nominated everyone else in the cast and crew, and somehow Leo did not get a nomination. But that's beside the point. DiCaprio circled numerous projects in the time between the runaway success of Titanic, came out late 97 and then was number one at the box office well into February of 1998. And DiCaprio circled a bunch of projects, including Spike Lee's Summer of Sam. Thank goodness he didn't do that. Although the Rotten Tomatoes will tell you that it's a better movie than The Beach. Spoiler alert, it's not. I love Spike Lee. That's the worst movie he ever made. But that's also beside the point. DiCaprio never actually expressed interest in taking the role that had been earmarked for Christian Bale in American Psycho. But that was a big topic for discussion for a few weeks. It looked like Bale was going to get punted from that project. He was going to make his $5 million just the same. And DiCaprio was going to step in and play Patrick Bateman, the expert in, as he puts it, murders and executions. Don't you mean mergers and acquisitions? Oh, that's right, mergers and acquisitions. I must have misspoke. So DiCaprio circled that project, circled another project. He's looking around. He's trying to find the perfect vehicle to emerge from, not really seclusion, but how do you follow up something like Titanic? It's almost impossible. I don't know what you're supposed to do. But DiCaprio settled on The Beach. The book is really good. It's close to great. And the film is a very good adaptation as far as, yes, there are changes, but they don't throw out the focus of Garland's novel. They don't pretend that it was not a beautifully written book and a really compelling story. They kept what worked, and they went in a couple of different directions that cinematically I felt worked. I couldn't believe that the reviews were as bad as they were. The film is sitting at 21% on Rotten Tomatoes. I would say this might be the highest quality film with a score below 25%, as if that means anything. But the movie was originally earmarked. I think it was shot in the latter portion of 1998 or perhaps early 99. I don't know the exact mechanics. It couldn't have been an easy shoot. But the film was originally going to open in select theaters in December to qualify for the Oscars. This was the plan. Danny Boyle had done Trainspotting, which was a movie that kind of came on like a thunderbolt. And there were many people that were wondering, why wasn't it nominated for more Oscars for films released in 1996? They'd say, it's as good as Fargo in its own way. It's as good as The English Patient. It's as good as Secrets and Lies. It's as good as Breaking the Waves. It's as good as Jerry Maguire. I don't know. But Boyle, being a filmmaker of enormous talent, you got Leonardo DiCaprio. You had a big literary property. The expectation was it was going to be an Oscar contender. Well, presumably, when the distributors saw it a couple of months before release, or maybe it was a month, word leaked out, and this part I don't remember specifically, but word must have leaked out, this is not an Oscar contender. They'll be lucky to make back their production cost. That's what ended up happening. Film got mostly beaten up by the critics, and I'm not even sure if it turned a profit. But I understand why DiCaprio chose this role. The main character he plays is interesting because he is a bit of a cipher. He is a bit of an unknowable commodity. He's an American. He's a backpacker. He's a traveler. He's not an American vacationing across Europe. He's just there. And it's an interesting concept. The book goes into more detail about this concept. It is not something that I ever imagined. You want to call it ethnocentrism? My assumption is if you have an American in Europe, he is marking time until he can go back to America. The character of Richard that Leonardo DiCaprio plays in this film is not doing any such thing. As he puts it in a voiceover, you hope and you dream, but you never really believe that something is going to happen for you. In the world of this movie, the something is provided to Richard by another brilliant actor who had worked with Danny Boyle in Trainspotting. It's embarrassing. I can't remember. I'll remember his name in a second. He was also in The Full Monty. Robert Carlyle. I am so sorry that I blanked on his name. Robert Carlyle is maybe the most undersold, brilliant actor that I can think of. He is never not great. He's incredible in the Full Monty. He's incredible in Trainspotting. And in this movie, he plays an even wackier character than in either of those two. So he meets DiCaprio's character of Richard early in the film. And he tells him this crazy story. I have a map for a beach. It's a secret beach. You know the movie, the M. Night Shyamalan film Old? Pretend that it's that. It's a secret beach. It's a very exclusive beach. And maybe it doesn't even exist. Well, the beach in this movie is somewhere near Thailand or in Thailand. And I guess the promise of utopia, the promise of a more evolved society, although I don't know how that would work exactly. In the case of Richard, he just wants to experience something other than the norm. I don't believe that he, either in the book or in the movie, he has any kind of high-minded ideas about this is going to be where I'll live for the rest of my life. There are things that you don't necessarily think through in real life. And in the world of the movie, the fact that Richard doesn't run all of these permutations down before even trying to get there, because there is the idea of what if you get what you want and realize that you don't want it. And it's a concept that is not something that me as a kid ever really considered. But there's a moment in the movie Chariots of Fire, which is similar conceptually to what I just said. The main character, Harold Abrahams, played brilliantly by the late Ben Cross, where he has gone years of his life training, getting his body and his mind as right as possible to challenge for the Olympic gold medal in the 100-meter dash. His entire existence is dependent upon him winning gold. And when he gets right up to the point where he's about to go out there, he starts thinking about what happens if I win. And it's an incredible moment in that film. He says, I've known the fear of losing, but now I'm almost too frightened to win. The character of Richard, all he knows is he wants to get there. But if he had taken a brief pause and said, okay, let's say that I do get there. Let's say that it is indeed the best possible version of this. It's an evolved society. There'll be some kind of a civilization. People, I don't know if they'll be living there or if they spend time there like it's a secret getaway. We don't know any of this. But he doesn't stop to think, what if once you get there, you can't leave? M. Night Shyamalan's movie Old. Once you get to the old beach and you start aging 1 year for every hour, sorry, spoiler alert, you already know that. You start aging 1 year, you can't leave. You're just going to stay at the old beach until you expire. Tough shit. Well, the movie, The Beach, it's not quite as ghastly as that, but it's also not as refined as you would like to think. There are elements of Lord of the Flies. There are elements of Apocalypse Now. There are a lot of different movies competing within the world of this film. And unfortunately for Leo, who, as we know, is a really good actor, on top of, he's a great looking guy. The Logan's Run aspect of his existence, that once the girlfriend gets to be 26, he has to get rid of her. But he is really good. This is not that great of an actor's part. And when I said I understood why he took it, it's a strong lead, at least in theory. It's a character who does grow and change. You might say he almost devolves, because there is a little bit of the Colonel Kurtz aspect, Marlon Brando's character in Apocalypse Now. You want to compare what DiCaprio does in this movie to Brando, there are a couple of shots in this film. I'm telling you, it is not an accident. Marlon Brando, the moments where his character is saying stuff like, the horror. The framing of DiCaprio, who is still really young, still looks like a college kid here. He's about 26 when this movie was shot, maybe not even. But he has that kind of intense gaze, a little bit of a Russell Crowe gaze. Brando, that dead-eyed look that he flashes in Apocalypse Now, the horror. I never really understood why he was saying that. He was, spoiler alert, committing mass murder, but he was talking about the horror. Hey, asshole, the horror is you. Look in the mirror. But yeah, so it's not that great of a character as far as getting to show off. The supporting characters, though, are interesting, and the book and movie diverge slightly in the way the female lead, I think a pretty solid actress who had been a fashion model named Virginia Ledoyen. The character is Francoise, is the name. And Leonardo meets this couple. The guy's name, I don't remember his name, but the girlfriend is Francoise. And they're very nice. These are young people. They're his age. They're not from Thailand or anywhere near there. I think they're French. And he meets them, and within, if you haven't read the book, within 2 seconds, okay, Leo's going to hook up with this girl. She's really hot, and she's age appropriate, whether it's the character of Richard or Leo in real life. You could make a joke. She'd be perfect now. But the book does something that I wasn't expecting, because I read the book first. It sets up that the character of Richard, when he sees her, the assumption is that he's going to want to kind of steal her away from the boyfriend. Now, maybe if he has sex with her, the boyfriend will not want to be with her anymore. So technically that would be correct. But that's not what I was expecting, and that's not what the movie really does. The book more directly sets up the character of Francoise as if she's going to be kind of a conquest, but it doesn't go in that direction. It doesn't do what you're thinking. The movie takes a more conventional route. And that was something that I liked. And I feel like a lot of people who read the book said, well, they fucked that up. They didn't handle the situation with Richard and Francoise correctly. I think they did. I think they improved on it. So the movie, as I said, when it landed, it got a lot of lousy reviews. There were some critics that appreciated that DiCaprio wanted to try something different. This is not Jack Dawson, even though the movies did have certain things in common. And if you just were to start the movie with DiCaprio at this beach already acting goofy, you could say, yeah, it's Jack Dawson. There's been some kind of a time warp, and he just ended up in Thailand after he presumably froze to death and or drowned, spoiler alert, at the end of Titanic. But the film got lousy reviews and didn't make that much of an imprint at the box office. As I said, I didn't look at the numbers. I don't think... if it turned a profit worldwide, it barely turned a profit. It was not a big hit. And this was a difficult shoot. It was not a cheap film. It didn't have crazy special effects. But there were a lot of shots and moments in this film which couldn't have been easy to achieve. There are a lot of cast and extras. without looking, my guess is the film was probably about $25 or $30 million budget. I don't know what Leo got paid for it. I have no idea. So the movie was considered a failure. There are those that would say it's the weakest big studio film of DiCaprio's career. I think a lot of people would say that. No, I necessarily agree. Again, I would give this film at least 3 stars out of 4. I'm an outlier in terms of how I took it. I think it's way better than its reputation. And it's probably the worst film that Boyle made, because Boyle doesn't miss. I mean, the guy did Slumdog Millionaire too. I didn't even realize that. And he did the film Sunshine, which was, I think, written by Alex Garland. 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later, the sequel to Trainspotting. I mean, Danny Boyle is a monster filmmaker. And I apologize to Peter Cattaneo, I thought that Danny Boyle had made The Full Monty, but it wasn't him. Full Monty is one of the best reviewed comedies ever. I think it's 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's a movie I'm going to have to talk about at some point. Robert Carlyle is the lead, and the late and really, really strong actor, Tom Wilkinson. What an incredibly versatile performer Tom Wilkinson was. But they play guys. It's a recession of the mid-90s. The United States, we had it here, and they had it in England. And they play a bunch of guys who are trying to support their families. They're not getting enough from the British version of welfare. They're having trouble. The job market has dried up. So they put on a new review type show. And the title is, are they going to basically show it all on stage? Nobody said anything to me about The Full Monty. DiCaprio, though, rebounded from the relative failure and disappointment of The Beach. And he went to work with Martin Scorsese on Gangs of New York not long after he completed this. It was probably about 6 months. The Gangs of New York was a very long, gestating project. Martin Scorsese does not shoot movies quickly. He does not shoot them on the cheap. Everything has to be right. And not surprisingly, Harvey Weinstein gave him a really difficult time during the filming of Gangs of New York. But Gangs of New York began shooting early enough where there was actually talk it was going to be completed by the end of 2021. And it ended up coming out at the end of 2022. There were reshoots, there were all kinds of issues. So the way that it worked out, DiCaprio's next 2 movies were released within a week or 2 weeks of one another, Gangs of New York and Catch Me If You Can. But that was not the intention. Gangs of New York was supposed to come out way before. It was shot way before. So it's interesting to kind of look at, if you just want to study DiCaprio and how he is presented in The Beach versus how he is presented as Amsterdam Vallon in Gangs of New York, and then as Frank Abagnale Jr. in Catch Me If You Can. It just shows the talent this guy has. It's not all makeup. Yeah, he looks a little bit grimy in Gangs of New York, but the scenes where he's clean shaven, he doesn't come across in any way like either Amsterdam Vallon or the character of Richard in The Beach or Frank Abagnale Jr. He doesn't look, he just has a completely different comportment. And it was good that he rebounded so quickly because, you know, you don't have unlimited chances, even if you're as young as DiCaprio. They're not going to keep trying desperately to grab you as they did after Titanic if you have a number of misses. And Gangs of New York maybe didn't do quite as well as some people expected. It's good. It's not in Scorsese's top 5. I don't even know if it's in his top 10. It's a good movie. It's not great. But for reference, if you ask me, do I think Bringing Out the Dead is better than Gangs of New York? Yes. Yes, it is. 100% agree. Definitely a better movie. Scorsese has rarely missed. Gangs of New York, and it's tough to say it quickly, Gangs of New York versus The Irishman, I'm going to put Gangs of New York above The Irishman. The Irishman is a movie that I like, but I feel like the story doesn't have the same kind of drive and energy as Gangs does. But yeah, that movie, there were a lot of reshoots, and it was difficult. That's how Tom Hanks ended up. I mentioned this on a previous episode. Tom Hanks only ended up playing Carl Hanratty in Catch Me If You Can because James Gandolfini dropped out. And the reason why James Gandolfini dropped out is Scorsese needed DiCaprio for reshoots as they were getting ready to start shooting Catch Me If You Can. I think that would have been late 2021, so that got pushed back. But that's Hollywood. Everything gets pushed back. Now, in the case of The Beach, the date, it was always going to open wide early in the year. But if the buzz had been strong, if there had been any possibility for any Oscar nominations, they would have released it in a couple of theaters. So when they pushed it back, I remember when they said they're not doing a December soft release of the film. It's not going to be an Oscar contender. And you knew that kind of information wasn't going to be wrong. That sort of info has never been wrong. When a movie is being geared to be an Oscar contender and somebody in the business or like a gossip hound who works in and around Hollywood, I think it was Jeffrey Wells of Mr. Showbiz, when someone like that says, this is not an Oscar contender, it's not. They've never been wrong. But I'll give you another example in the same era. The movie The Majestic, the Jim Carrey film, which I think was directed by the guy who did Green Mile and then later did The Walking Dead. Was it Frank Darabont? No, it wasn't Darabont. It was a different filmmaker, I think. I can't remember. But The Majestic was a movie that had the pedigree, and it was Jim Carrey in another kind of serious role. It dealt with the Red Scare and the Hollywood blacklist. And there were a lot of people that had a sort of a Frank Capra feel. That was the very early buzz. And there was a ton of people talking, maybe Jim will finally get a Best Actor nomination. And when the film hit, it just laid an egg. Some critics really liked it, but a lot of critics, this is just a misfire. Jim is miscast. And yeah, they were wrong when they first thought it was going to be Oscar buzz. And then they weren't wrong. They said, no, this movie's not that good. And that's what happened with The Beach. You see the pedigree, you make assumptions. Sometimes you're going to be right, and sometimes you're going to be wrong. The Beach was always going to just be one movie. This was never going to be a franchise. As Titanic, people used to joke about Titanic 2, it missed the iceberg. That was a working title. Leslie Nielsen would have been 99 today. Titanic 2, It Missed the Iceberg was a working title for one of Leslie's, it might have been wrongfully accused, I'm not sure, but that obviously was never going to be made, but it was a working title for one of his spoofs. It could have been wrongfully accused, it could have been WD-40, I'm not sure about that, but that was definitely out there. I remember getting a chuckle, Titanic 2, It Missed the Iceberg. But The Beach, celebrating its 25th anniversary today, it is a movie that I am a fan of. And I don't know that many people who've seen it who didn't like it. It's not anything great, but it does give you a lot to chew on, and it goes down some interesting avenues that you're not expecting, whether or not you read the book, regardless of whether or not you read the book. As a cinematic experience, the music is good, and the location of the so-called secret beach, it really is incredible. It is absolutely gorgeous. I forgot where in Thailand it was, if in fact it even was in Thailand. So I haven't seen this film in quite some time, but it just sort of came on the radar recently with, some of DiCaprio, what he's working on, and some of the projects he was going to do and then backed off, like Devil in the White City. And I just remember really liking the film and being surprised that the critics mostly trashed it. And another thing, when it was released to DVD, the DVD contained a number of deleted scenes, which I thought should have been left in the movie. And unfortunately, there's no way to know, even a really talented filmmaker such as Danny Boyle. There are things that he can say, we must have this, but we don't desperately need that. I give him credit for showing his work, because people like me can say, I think the movie would have been even better with at least a few of those cut scenes, because they're really good and spin the movie into a slightly different direction. That's something you don't normally see. Often deleted scenes, and James Cameron has talked about this, speaking of Titanic, that there are certain scenes that are good on their own as individual moments, but they don't necessarily fit the particular story the filmmaker is trying to tell. And that's where you have like 3 different cuts of Terminator 2 and 2 very distinct and distinctive cuts of Aliens in the case of James Cameron. They're all fantastic. It's just different levels of greatness is how I would describe it. I think The Beach probably would have benefited from some of those cut scenes finding their way back into the film. But we'll never know. They're not going to do like a beach supercut film. Not enough people are, oh my God, this would be incredible. It's not ever going to happen. But the movie, The Beach, is worth your time. I will vouch for it. This is a 3-star out of 4 movie. And even though it isn't that exciting of a character, DiCaprio gives a solid performance. And all the other actors in the film, everyone looks great. Cinematography is magnificent. The Beach, directed by Danny Boyle from a novel by Alex Garland, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Virginia Ledoyen, Robert Carlyle. This has been episode 444 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your chilly, about to be snowy Tuesday evening here with me in New York. But if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then,